So over the next few weeks as we produce our album, I'm going to be releasing a series of content videos outlining the recording process as we move through it. The first will be the album conceptualization phase, which is that video is going to be released at the same time as this one. This video is a bit of an overview of the process in general so that you understand what the phases are as we move through them. A few points I want to make about this process. First of all, there are no real rules. Not everybody follows a process. Personally, I think it's important if you want to record with me, you follow a process. Secondly, this is my process. It's different for different people. I didn't go to recording school. I didn't go to a music school. I learned on the job. I learned in doing the work how I like to do these things. A lot of the steps and the elements of my process are going to overlap with, I'm sure, the way other producers, engineers do it, and I'm sure the way recording schools teach it, or music schools. Does it work? Does it lead to something great? Is our album going to be more than just a collection of songs because we go through this process? Well, watch me execute it over the next few weeks and let the final product on April 19th help you judge that. So, why do we have a recording process? Isn't a musical recording just a recording capture of an artistic performance? Don't we just put musicians on their instruments and record what they play and record the singer what they're singing? And shouldn't that be a record document of the song? Why do we need a process to do something artistic? Well, for a number of reasons. One important reason is that the recording process requires, or a recording requires collaboration from a number of different kinds of experts. So there's all these experts, and for them to collaborate successfully and for them to do their best job, the process ensures that the deliverables reach each expert at each phase. Now, in the case of this album, I'm going to be filling all of those roles. But still, when I sit down to mix, for example, I need to make sure that I have the tracks in the right format and that the tracking phase is done so that I can mix. When I decide to track this album, I have to make sure I have good demos. I have to make sure it's pre-produced. Before I pick up instruments and start playing them, I have to have decided what instruments will they be, what will they sound like, right? What notes am I going to be playing on them? So in order for each one of those experts to do their job at each phase, they have to have the right deliverables. So that's another reason why we have a process. So the product goes through this assembly line in a processed way as it reaches those experts. Another reason is deadlines. I'm an artist, and I like to take my time with artistic endeavor, and it's true, it's very difficult to rush creativity. However, I'm also a human that has to support myself. I have to eat. I have to be a business person, which means I got to get done. Artists need deadlines. Projects need deadlines. Any product endeavor, music and creative products included, typically, now obviously Axl Rose took however many years to make that shitty Chinese Democracy album, and look how that turned out. But typically speaking, deadlines are critical to the recording process, and the process is necessary to meet them. Another reason why we have to have a process in place is cost. So not in the case of this album, because it's just me, which is probably the biggest challenge for the album. me and you helping me and providing your creative input, but doing the heavy lifting here is just me. But typically, you would have to have a studio space. You would have to have the producer. You would have to have the engineer, the artist, the session players, and any number of peripheral individuals involved in the production of an album. And those are all mouths to feed. And every day that the production goes on costs more money. So we have to have a process so that we can move through it as quickly as possible, because recording music can be very expensive. But I think the most near and dear to my heart reason that we have to have a recording process is direction. The recording process ensures a cohesive direction for an album. And I'm going to give you an example. I had an artist come to me fairly recently, brilliant artist, super talented artist, amazing songs, wonderful singer, guitar player, piano player, experienced, had record deals, had toured the country, has had songs on huge television shows, very, very experienced artist. Came to me, and they had already taken a crack at making an album, and they had taken their band into a producer that was an excellent producer and an excellent engineer, but busy with larger, more expensive names than this artist. So she took her band into this producer's studio, recorded her songs in the producer's studio. And what she left with the studio was a collection of her songs recorded, fantastic musicians. All of the instruments were very well recorded. The songs sound nice and the songs sound pleasing. But it was a collection of songs that didn't necessarily satisfy her artistic vision with respect to the thing that I've been talking about since we started talking about this album, a unique and special sonic aesthetic and imprint. It didn't satisfy her artistic vision. A good example of this was a song that she brought to me and asked me to mix at first. And she wanted the song to sound like the Coldplay song, Clocks. So I took a listen to her song as it was recorded and the individual tracks that had been recorded. It's a beautiful song, dynamic song, amazing session players, sounded great. But, and I was obviously already familiar with the Coldplay song, but it wasn't recorded in a way where it could be mixed or mangled into sounding like that song. That was her vision. But that vision was not communicated to the session players during the tracking phase of the recording process. That vision was not communicated to the engineer who was miking the drums or the drummer who was playing the drums. So we had these big, busy rock and roll drums that were, and wonderful performance, but just too big and heavy and busy for a Coldplay sound. Same thing with the bass guitar. Amazing bass guitar, wonderful bass player, but didn't receive the direction to make it sound like Coldplay. There was no pre-production process where the song was demoed so that these instruments were arranged in a way that the notes were chosen and the rhythms and the syncopation and the feel was established in order to, when they got to the tracking phase, know what to play so that they could have that feel. And then finally, the producer mixed it, but in the mix phase, the desire to make this sound like Coldplay wasn't communicated. So what we had was a beautiful song that didn't meet the artistic vision of the artist because we didn't follow a recording process. And I would say that's typical of music that doesn't follow a process. let's look at the steps in the recording process. The first phase is the conceptualization phase, and what I mean by that is the strategic plan for creative direction of the record. I just finished some video content outlining that stage because we just finished that stage for this quarantine album project. So when you get done here, that's a good next place to go for information about recording process. The next stage after conceptualization is the songwriting stage. And what I mean by that is not just writing songs, but writing songs with album concept and production in mind. And we're going to do a similar video on songwriting, and you'll probably spend a lot of time watching me and hearing me talk about songwriting and looking at the songs that we're making for this album with an eye on what is the album, what is the concept, and are we keeping our production in mind in the song content. The next phase for me typically is the pre-production phase or the demo phase. Now, I think this is a highly overlooked phase in music production. When I hear music that wasn't successful, I can always, in terms of reaching a bigger audience, earning money, finding placement, however you define success, grooving people. Usually, if it lacks pre-production, I can immediately hear it. So we're going to do a video on pre-production in a couple of weeks, and I'll show you why. The next phase after pre-production is tracking. Now, tracking is really where the rubber meets the road. It's the actual recorded performance for every instrument. So the reason it's called tracking is because the music is recorded in tracks, meaning, and each track is a layer, right? And so we call it tracking. So that's when the actual drums are recorded that are going to be the permanent version, when the singer, when the artist is going to come in and actually play the guitar solo or the piano solo or the vocal lyric, and they're going to sing the one that the audience hopefully is going to be listening to forever. Tracking is where the rubber meets the road. The next phase is the mix phase, and I feel that mixing is probably the most underappreciated art in music production. Probably not by people that are actually professionals at music production, but from the outside, I don't think people realize what a deep art mixing is. And you're going to see when we mix this album, when you hear the effect that mixing has and the difference that it makes to our tracks that we finished with in the previous phase, it's going to blow you away what mix can mean. So the mixing phase, highly underappreciated art. I can't wait to get to that one. And then finally, the mastering phase, which is not the sexiest phase, but critical to success. So that'll be the last thing we do, and that's kind of like putting the polish on the car after you wash it. So those are the recording process steps, and now we're going to get started looking at them individually, starting with album conceptualization, because we just finished that stage.